Well, good afternoon. I cannot believe it's already Friday. Wow, how did this week go by so very, very quickly? I am so happy to see those of you that are here today. I am so looking forward to this time together. It's one of my favorite parts in the education and the training that my husband and I do on the weekends. And I want to just pause. Let's see, can we get the PowerPoint up? There we go, perfect. I'm gonna back it up one, see if I can do that. There we go. If you've seen this here on the screen today, I just wanna mention a couple of things. We have a website and we have a Facebook page for a very important purpose, so that you can be supported when you leave camp meeting. So you might go down another, week or two from now, and then something is going to either trigger a memory about the loss in your life, or someone close to you is going to experience a death. And what would you like to be able to offer them? One of the things that you can offer them is access to our website, comfortfortheday.com. And on this website, you will find we blog for the hurting and for the comforter. So let's say you just want to have like a little refresher. Go to those blogs for the comforter that will just help remind you about some of the things you've learned here. Or if you are an email person, you can copy that link for the hurting and send a blog to somebody via email. Read this might help you. Do you see what we're saying? This space that is so available to us now freely allows us to be able to support one another in our grief. The other one is if you are a Facebook user, you will find us at Comfort for the Day on Facebook. If you like that or follow Facebook Comfort for the Day, then when I post there, it comes on your feed and you get a little extra boost. Oh yeah, that's what I needed to remember about comforting someone else. Or, oh, this was really helpful for me in my own grief. And then like anything with Facebook, you can share that with your own friends. And this is just a simple way by which we can share with other people the good news that we can grieve in a healthy way. And as a reminder, what did we learn this week? We learned that your grief matters, right? All of our losses under that grief umbrella matter. They matter to us, and thankfully they matter to God. That is such good news. We also learned that in order to be healthy in our grief, we get to do our grief work. Does anybody remember what one of the things in the list of things to do for grief work is? What's an action you can take in your grief work? Exercise. That's wonderful. What's another thing we can do in our grief work? Write down your thoughts, called journaling, or put your stuff on paper. That's another action of grief work. Does anybody else remember another grief work action? Go to a support group, absolutely. Read other books. Yes, this is all part of our grief work. Okay. So then on Wednesday, we reviewed the turning point for our grief that transitions us from unhealthy grief that spirals round and around and around into healthy grief. What is that? Do we remember? Forgiveness, that is right. When we are forgiven and we give forgiveness to others, it sets us free to grieve in a healthy way. Good work. Then yesterday we learned that when we use our words to comfort another person, it needs to be all about the griever and not about us. It's all about them and not about us. So we've learned some really important grief skills this week. Very important. And Just want to make sure, does everybody have a handout? What the grieving need from us? Okay. Tell me, if you are new today, this is your first day in this session, would you just raise your hand? I want to welcome you especially. I'm so glad that you folks are here. Those that have been with us all week know that we do something a little untraditional. We move around in this session, and we get acquainted with each other, and we share with one another. So I'm going to invite us right from the get-go. Before I do that, Steve, if you don't mind, or Carolina, I need one of those handouts up here with me. Thank you so much. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'd like for you to get into groups of about 6 or 7. Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you. 6, 7, 8. Let's have a group that meets over here, and maybe one there, one here, where you're kind of located. And again, you're going to want to join a group in order to get the full benefit. So let's, without delay, get ourselves moved into groups of about 8. You can go and give it the gentleman over there. So let's move from where we're at, or turn around your chairs. Get yourselves in a group. Oh, that's wonderful. I love seeing that happen. Good job, everybody. Oh, they're coming right over to you. That is perfect. Okay, so here's what we're going to do today with this handout. I'd like the people in your group to read out loud. There are 7 quotes on this page. And go around your circle, and if each one of you would read out loud one of those quotes, and then keep going to the next one and the next one until you've read all 7. Now here's the instructions. Please refrain from sharing about them until the very end. When all 7 have been read, that's the time for you to share with each other which of these quotes was most meaningful to you and why. Now, we're looking at this because we want to learn, what do grieving people need most from us? So think about this as being our teacher for teaching us, what do grieving people really need from us? When we're all done, I'll come back up here, and the microphones will be available. And I'd like for maybe someone to summarize in your group what you thought your group thought was the most important thing that the grieving people need from you. Okay? And like other times, I'm going to go over to the smaller camera and talk to those that are watching it on television. And when I'm done, I'll come back up here, and we'll kind of pull our conversations to an end, and then we'll share with the larger group. Go ahead and begin, everybody. I have no idea who's with you in your space while you're watching this on TV, but it would be wonderful if there were a few of you together, that as I'm reading these quotes, that you might make a note about it, and then you might just have a minute or two to share with each other how this helps you learn what grieving people really need. So, here's our first quote, written by a man named John Spade. He says this: "Condolence is an art that requires wisdom, tact, and courage. It means being honest about your own feelings, not trying to persuade your grieving friend to feel better, and being available to listen." What do you think some of the takeaways for that one? The word that pops out to me is the word courage. It does take courage to step in the space of someone else's pain, doesn't it? Our next quote comes from a woman named Judy Bresendine. She writes, "So when someone you know is grieving, love them. Offer support where you can. Stay in touch. Nurture your connection with them. Reach out. Be understanding. Offer to listen.
but don't tell them how to grieve. And don't make judgments. Your greatest gift to someone who is grieving is to make sure they know you care and that you're ready to listen. Encourage them to let you know how you can best help them, and then follow through. Wow, those are a lot of great suggestions on how to support a grieving friend, isn't it? This one I especially like, and we did read this one yesterday. When your fear touches someone's pain, it becomes pity. When your love touches someone's pain, it becomes compassion. Stephen Levine writes that one. This is from Harold Kushner, a rabbi. At some of the darkest moments in my life, some people I thought of as friends deserted me. Some because they cared about me and it hurt them to see me in pain. Others because it reminded them of their own vulnerability, and that was more than they could handle. But real friends overcame their discomfort and came to sit with me. If they had no words to make me feel better, they sat in silence. Much better than saying, "Oh, you'll get over it," or "It's not so bad," or "Others have it worse." And I loved them for not saying those things. Jean Kerneron, who was dying of cancer, wrote this: "Honest listening is one of the best medicines we can offer the dying and the bereaved." The sixth quote is written by Henry Nouwen. "The friend that can be silent with us in our moment of confusion or despair, who can stay with us in our hour of grief and bereavement, who can even tolerate not knowing, not healing, not curing, that is a friend indeed." Last of all, I found this on the internet from a site called Still Standing. "But mostly it means I need you to remember the important day he was born and the day he died. You see, my friend, I don't expect you to fix any of this. And really, all I need is to know that his name can be mentioned without fear, without guilt, and without uncertainty." That's the wish and the desire of a parent whose child has died. But it could be also the wish and the desire of anybody whose spouse has died. Oh, don't we see that just by mentioning someone's name, that brings comfort to the grieving person? Sure, it might bring tears, but it will also bring comfort that somebody has remembered the name of my loved one. So what are you thinking? What are some of the things that you heard from this list that grieving people need from us? Do they need us to fix it? No. What do you think? We're going to hear from the rest of the group in a little bit and find out what those groups each discovered were one of the things that grieving people need. But between you and I think they need us just to listen. That's what we're going to learn to do today. I'll meet you back up on the stage in a minute. Okay, give yourselves about 30 seconds to wrap up your conversation, and make sure somebody in your group is willing to be the spokesperson to share on the microphone what your group thinks are the most important things grieving people need. So do you have somebody picked out? Somebody that's going to share what you think is the most important thing a grieving person needs. So, Steve, are you our only microphone? 2 microphones. Okay, I'll pause for just a minute, do a little countdown. By the time I get to 0, I'd like everybody to stop your conversation. So 10, 9, 8,
7, 6,
Oh,
5,
okay.
4,
What we found.
3, 2, and 1. Just wanted everybody to be quiet so they could hear you. I think we've all come to quiet. Go ahead. Tell us, what do you think?
We decided that probably one of the biggest assets we could give is just to listen and let them vent. What they vent can be very depressing to each and every one of us listening to them, but it gives them a chance to get it out, to give them a chance to start over again with something new.
Thank you so much, group. Job well done. Steve, what about the back group where you're at?
Back here?
What was their conclusion? What do grieving people need most?
Same thing.
Wait till they're done.
We have the same thing. It's just being quiet and listening and not giving your input. So unless they ask for your input.
Oh, okay.
So just being quiet.
Being quiet.
Oh, we have, they want me to share. We learned this saying. It's called shut up and duck. And what it is you pretend that you're a duck where the water just flows off the back. So when somebody's talking to you, you don't have to take it all in. You just listen to them. And then if they want feedback, you give it. If they don't, you just be quiet.
Shut up and duck. Or shut up and, as I've said in the past, be ducky. Let that just run off. Because it's not your grief, remember? It's not our job to grieve someone else's grief. That's their work. So Steve, you got that group in the back. Do you want to let them go ahead?
Share? You guys are up from your room?
And then we'll do you guys next.
Don't have to, but...
Are they ready yet? No. Okay, let's go
Okay.
right ahead. What did
Okay,
your group decide?
Well, we had a whole bunch of things, but listening was one of them. But one of the ones that I think stuck out the most was after the funeral, when everyone is gone, be there.
Be there.
Yeah.
After the funeral, after that last casserole dish is washed, be there. Thank you. I like that group's comments. Okay, go right ahead.
We were on 4 and 5 about listening honestly and not trying to say you can get over it, just being there. But I think we all agreed on that.
Okay. Well, we've got some great learners. Okay, another group right here.
We like number 2. Sorry. We like number 2.
Put it real close to your mouth.
Just
Thank you.
love them and don't tell them how to grieve. Just listen.
Yeah, don't tell someone else how to grieve. Now, again, I'm just going to do this as just a review. Why is it not our place to tell someone else how to grieve? Because we all grieve differently. Exactly. So I'm not here to inform somebody that they need to grieve in a particular way. I'm glad you're catching that. Okay, we've got another group right here. What was your takeaway?
You have some more there?
Go right ahead.
It's pretty much been said that it's just to be there and be quiet, listen, and speak if they're asking you questions or want to share something with you. There's nothing else you can do because you have absolutely no idea what they're feeling inside.
Thank you. Now let me ask you a question. How natural or easy is it for us to be there and be quiet? It's not. That's where the conflict comes, isn't it? So we're all going, yes, let's just listen, be quiet, be there. But how easy is that? Are we all done with our groups commenting? Okay. I want to tell you all thank you. Thank you very much. You know, learning a new life skill takes a little bit of practice.
What about this?
It doesn't happen naturally. We've just all agreed that being there, being quiet, is not natural and easy for us, is it? But let me just pause for a second. And some of you are going to get this deeply into your soul, and you will leave today better prepared to comfort others. After reading what we've just read from broken-hearted grievers, specifically asking us, informing us, your job, my friend, is just to be still and quiet with me. can we take that in? And when we really get that, it's like all of a sudden I'm relieved. I don't even have to worry about what to say and what not to say. All the work we did yesterday almost doesn't matter. Do you see now? I just get to go and be there. My words aren't going to fix it for them, is it? My words aren't going to change it for them or heal it for them. But what will my presence do? Yes. Okay, we're going to need a microphone. Hold on just a minute, because we are on television and we want to make sure that everybody gets to hear what you have to say.
And if the person is receptive to touch them, hold their
Absolutely.
hand, because that can send a message to them that is very meaningful.
Thank you. I want to take us back to yesterday's natal. Oops, let's go the other direction. I'm going the wrong way. Let's try that. Natal, remember what it means? Never about us, ask for permission, touch with permission, or ask for clarification. It's a rare, here we go. Never about us, ask for clarification, touch with permission, always about them, and listen with your heart. That's a whole lot simpler than having to have just the right words to say, isn't it? Okay? So that's what we're going to practice today. That is exactly what we're going to practice today. We read that yesterday, so we're going to keep moving forward. So, let's take a look. They need us to listen. Let me ask you a question. How long has it been since someone listened to you tell your loss and grief story? Some of you might say, no one's ever listened to my story. And some of you might say, well, it's been a really long time. In July, I travel every year, and Steve is now traveling with me to the Marble Falls, Texas area, to a camp called Camp Agape. It's a camp for children in bereavement, ages 7 to 12. And one of the important things that we do is listen to these children's story. You know, they go to school and they feel like the odd one out because everybody else has their moms and dads or their brothers and sisters. And they're missing their brother or their sister or their mom or their dad. And that is they feel so isolated, they feel so alone. And the first activity that we do is we get our group in this big circle and we toss a ball of yarn back and forth to each other, and we catch the ball and we hold onto the string. And when we do that, we say, my name is Karen, and I am here to support you in your grief. And the person that died in my life is my son. And then that child, that's what I would say to start with, and I toss it to a child, and they would say, you know, my name is Hannah, and I am here because my dad died. By the time we're done with 13 or 14 of tossing the balls, these children in the circle are now completely and totally connected. The string that's between us just acts as the illustration of our connection. They've now heard stories, brief stories, of who is important in their life that died. And you know, I had gone for a number of years without telling my story about Dawson to anybody. And at the candle lighting service at the end of that week with those children, we light a candle in the memory of our deceased loved one, and we tell a brief story about them. And it just hit me so profoundly that I really needed someone to listen longer than just that few minutes as we went around the circle. And I found one of the other adult staff, and I took my picture of Dawson, and I went up to her and I said, "Would you listen as I tell you about my son?" And she did. That was the grandest gift she could give me. And I could tell her about the special things that were about my son. So I ask you, when was the last time someone listened to you tell your story of your loss? On the flip side of that same coin, when was the last time you listened to someone else tell their story? Sometimes we're so afraid of that because we don't know how to listen this way. And so if they just need to be listened to, how do we listen to them? Now, I am sure here at camp meeting, you have done a lot of talking and a lot of listening. I'm sure you've had people visit you at your camp, and you sit around and you eat your meals together. You come in the evening meeting and you chat afterwards, and you go to the dining hall and you chat, or you're at the ABC and you chat, and we have conversations, don't we? And the purpose of those conversations are to get to know each other. The purpose of the conversation is to share information, is to find places that we're connected with each other, that we have similar life experiences with. And that's just beautiful and wonderful conversational listening. I mean, it's no fun when someone's talking and then all of a sudden they stop talking and nobody says anything. There's no response. There's no, "Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, I visited Yellowstone last year myself." You know what I'm saying? And so to have that conversation flow, what do we have to be doing when we're listening in that conversation flow? What do we need to be doing? Are we thinking? In order to respond, we're thinking about our own stories and how our stories match your stories. So we need to be thinking, and we might even have questions that we want more information about from someone else, like, "Oh yeah, so what happened when you did that?" And then they add more information, and "Oh yeah, that's right, I remember." And the conversation continues to flow. Because while we're listening, we are also thinking. We're thinking and we're comparing, and sometimes we're judging, and sometimes, maybe, hopefully not in a bad way. And we're thinking about what we're going to say next, how we can add to the conversation. And that is perfect for conversational listening, right? Absolutely. That is how we enter into dialogue, and we build friendships and understanding, and all that happens. When we engage in comfort listening, it's a very, very different activity. Comfort listening is completely different than conversational listening. When we comfort listen, we listen with our heart. How is that different than listening with your mind? Okay, the mind might forget, but the heart does not. I like that possibility. What about when we listen with our mind, are we thinking about the next thing we're going to say? When we listen with our mind, we're kind of casting some value or judgment or comparison, or you see, the mind is going. And so when we're comfort listening, our mind that's not the time for our mind to be distracted. So we're listening with our heart. And that means if what we're listening to and who we're listening to touches our heart, we do what Jesus did. We weep with those who weep. We feel with those who feel. We allow what they're experiencing to touch our lives. And that happens through the heart. The mind often shuts those doors, doesn't it? But the heart will leave it open. So when we're comfort listening, there is no judgment about someone's story. no judgment. Someone's story might include the death of someone close to them who took their own life. Some of us in this room might struggle with judging about that. And so would we need to say, this is not my turn to judge. There's no judgment with this. So there's no judgment in our listening. There's no comparing or valuing. I often hear people tell me, oh, the death of a child, that has to be the worst kind of grief there is. I don't know if it is. But I would feel much better if we didn't compare it. Because what I do know is that your grief is your grief. And it might not be your worst grief. Remember me telling you the other day that my stepfather and my birth father both died? And those were not hard griefs for me because of the relationship to and the relationship with them. And so, you see, we can't value someone else's grief. We can't judge it against our grief experience. What would that do? That would put a barrier and a wall between us. And we think when we do that, comparing or judging, we think that it's going to bring us closer to each other. But that's not going to happen. So we want to dismiss with any comparing or valuing. And so importantly, we want to listen with our eyes. See, if I'm listening to someone tell me their grief story, their loss story, and I look away or I look down, what does that tell the person who's talking to me? I kind of have stopped listening, or I'm uncomfortable with their story. Remember, is this all about us? No, it's all about them. And if I'm ducky, if I let that roll off of me, I can just be present with them and listen. Listen with my eyes. So I want to keep eye contact. I also want to listen, to hear, and feel. It's okay to hear and feel the other person's experience. And back to the idea of touch, to listen with touch, but do so with permission. Is this okay? And just touch the knee or the shoulder. Is this okay? You'll know. They'll pull away if it's not okay. They'll pull away. Respect that. Respect that. Sometimes you just put your hand out and they'll put their hands in your hand. Okay? And there's that connection of touch listening. So this kind of listening is healing listening. It's comfort listening. This kind of listening is the kind of listening that chaplains learn when they take chaplaincy school and they walk into those hospital rooms where there is so much pain and sorrow, and they simply listen. They touch a shoulder. Their words don't have to change anything, do they? I had a story of a pastor up at a church in Washington area, and in his young pastoral training, he had a little section of chaplaincy training. And then he got this call. No, he didn't have any chaplaincy training, I don't think. He got a phone call about a parishioner that was in the hospital. And it was a very serious situation, and death could have been an option there. And he got there at the hospital, and he's young in his work of ministry, and he just had no idea what to say. He had no preparation, no training for this at all. And so he stood by the side of the bed and just prayed silently. And just prayed silently. And after about 10 or 15 minutes that passed, he said, I think it's time for me to go now. And he did, just quietly left the room. After the crisis had passed, those people that were in the hospital that day came to him and said, your being with us was the most important thing that ever happened. Thank you so much. You see, it was way easier than he thought. He realized he didn't have to come to fix it. He didn't have to come with the answers. He didn't have to come say, oh, that's okay, it's going to get better. No, he could just be there. Now, so in order to help us practice this comfort listening experience, we're going to actually get to buddy up. And I'm going to ask that men join with men and women with women. Please don't buddy up with a spouse. I want you to find somebody else, and hopefully somebody you really don't know. And one of you is going to tell the story that you haven't told in a long time because no one has listened to you in a while. And you're going to have 4 minutes to tell your story. Now, you as the storyteller are simply going to provide the atmosphere for the listener to practice this kind of listening. Because it's new and it's different and it's not common to us, I would be a very remiss educator if I just told you about comfort listening and didn't give you the opportunity to practice. So this is simply a practice session to practice, and these will stay up on the board so you can refer to them. But once you begin listening, try not to look back at them, because where is your attention supposed to be? On the person who's telling the story. You're just going to get to hear their story. Some people call it holding the space for them. Hear their story. And 4 minutes is going to go past very quickly for you storytellers. Now, if it doesn't and you finish your story early, I'm going to ask you to just sit in silence and wait. The 4-minute bell will ring, and I'll be right back up here. I'm going to tell my story to the camera, so those folks are going to get to practice comfort listening. And then we're going to just pause for a minute, and we're going to do a little debriefing. How did it go for the listener? How did it go for the storyteller? Okay? So, does everybody have that instructions? Is that clear? So do not begin telling your story until I ask you to, because then the timer will be even for everybody. But right now, you get to get up and move, give yourself some space, find a partner to tell your story to, not your spouse, somebody else. And everybody find somebody. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds, and when you've all found somebody, raise your hand so I know that you're all partnered up. Men with men with men, and ladies with ladies, and not spouses. Men with men and ladies with ladies. Want to make sure. If we have an extra man, I see a couple of men that don't have a partner yet. Okay? Yeah, just beautiful. You guys are getting your groups gorgeously. I think Dan and Steve would make great partners. Okay, now do decide who's in your group that's going to be the storyteller and who's going to do the listening. Okay, have you decided in your group who's doing what? Okay, you guys have done fabulous. Good work. Now, if there's 3 in a group, one of you is going to be the observer. And you're going to observe what the other 2 are doing. Just notice, okay? And so you can give us a little account of what happens when you're observing. Okay, looks like everybody got in their teams. That is fantastic. Nice job, everyone. Now I'm going to get my timer out, and I'm going to put it on 4 minutes. Storytellers, you may begin.
So I'm going to tell you the story about the time when my sweet and beautiful boy played at the park. This is just a few weeks before he died. And it was winter time. And he loved nature so very, very much. He was out there in the park, and a little bird was hopping along the grass kind of towards him. And there he was with his sweet little hands out, walking so carefully with his hands out, going, "Here, little birdie, 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 here, little birdie, birdie." And I was watching from a distance because This mama knew what was going to happen next, and sure enough, up in the air, the bird flew. Dawson's head went flying back, and this big belly laugh came out. Oh, that's such a treasured memory I have of my little boy, and I don't get to tell it very often. So I want to thank you for listening to my story about Dawson and the birds. But the hard part of my story is that morning when he fell asleep in Jesus. Naturally, as any parent, it's never, never, never what we would want. And while it was so dark, and that last breath left his body, and we sobbed, I was confused because I thought for sure God would show up in that space. And there was no light glow that came in from the window, and there was no sense of angel wings wrapping around our shoulders, and it was just so silent and so dark. Our pediatrician was at the foot of the bed, and my husband and I were kneeling by Dawson's head and shoulders. And naturally we wept and held him close. But I couldn't figure out why God seemed so distant, so far away, so absent. It was a hard time in my grief, a really, really hard time in my grief. And it lasted for a couple of weeks. Just, God, where were you when we needed you most? I thought there'd be some kind of physical evidence. And I want to tell you this story because I know it happens to other people, and I don't know if it's happened to you, and I know you're supposed to be listening just to hear my story, but you need to hear the other part of the story, and that's when the pastor that showed up later on that day told us a couple weeks afterwards that the pediatrician had shared with him that she had never been with a family that had been so peaceful at the death of their child. And it took a few weeks for me to figure out what was really being told to me. That peace wasn't something that came from us. That was the presence of God. And so, in fact, he was there by the peace that we did experience. He didn't come showing anything physical. There was no light, and there was no angel choir music. There was no anything else that gave us any evidence except the peace that was in our hearts. And now my 4 minutes are up, and so is everybody else. So I'm going to go back up to the platform, and I'll see you there. How did your listening go?
Stay right where you're at with your sharing partner, because we're going to get to flip roles in just a little bit. Steve, do you mind having the microphone? We want to find out, do a little debriefing. I want to find out from the listeners first. If you were a listener and you're willing to be vulnerable and tell us what listening was like for you, was this easier than you thought? Was it harder than you thought? What part of listening in this way is kind of natural for you, or is it all unnatural for you? So if you are a listener, can you give us a little bit of feedback? Just raise your hand. We've got one right there. Put your microphone right up front so we can hear it well.
Yeah.
It's on, honey.
Sure it's on.
Is that a... You're on, go ahead.
Actually, I have hearing problems, and I have to focus very closely in order to listen to someone anyway. So that almost comes natural for me to really focus, make eye contact, watch the face. I don't really read lips, but I'm sure I pick up a lot of extra signals, and so all of that just kind of adds up to being a good listener. And that's my story.
Well, thank you for sharing. I'm so glad that what could be a frustration to some people by not hearing well has become a benefit for you to truly hear. As a listener, how did that go for you, David?
Well, I don't know if I did this right, but Cal said he didn't really have any stories to tell, so I asked him a question, and then he kind of went from there. And then when he ran out, I asked him another question about the same subject, and I just probably asked 6 or 7 questions, and then the 4 minutes would
Wow.
explain the whole thing.
Did it go by more quickly than you expected?
Yeah, we just started getting into the good part.
Into the good part. Okay. Now, just tell me, though, when you were listening and not asking the question, did you listen in any of these patterns?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. And how did that feel for you to listen this way?
Well, it felt pretty natural to me.
Good. Very good. Someone else that was a listener. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I guess
Whoops, we're not on yet.
We lose it?
I think I'm not getting the, there we go. I think I've liked to listen to other people most of my life, so it was kind of natural listening to him, and I think it was beneficial to both of us. So
It does benefit both of us, doesn't it? Yeah, that's an amazing thing. So listening's come naturally for you. Did you find that you did anything kind of differently, though?
no, I didn't want to interrupt him, but I was hoping I could, touch him or something, but I don't know. I didn't get a chance to ask him that, but
Okay,
But-
okay. So tell us, how did it feel to be listened to this way? Okay, we can't hear you, and just tell us how it felt to be listened to.
Okay, we'll just use this one here.
Yeah,
He listened very well,
he listened well.
and he asked a good question about my father. What was he like? And that enabled me to open up. As I said before, he died when I was 12 years old, and no one listened to me.
Wow, so how good it is to be listened to now, isn't it?
And he listened very well.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, go ahead right here, honey. As a listener, what was this like for you?
It brought up a lot of emotions in my mind
Okay.
as she was listening, and I had some conflicts, and I wanted to affirm her, and but I tried. It was hard to be neutral, and I had to ask clarifying questions, and to kind of encourage her to share more of the feelings that she was experiencing, and maybe a few more of the details, and to maintain neutral, but to support her. And at one point, it just struck me. To share with her about one aspect that we talked about that was so important in the grief work, but I'm listening, I'm not there to give advice.
Good.
And so I just continued to listen, and maybe later that would come.
Absolutely. Although she became this listener so aware that she wanted to be able to, add some advice to this, she went, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Okay, so Steve, you've just pointed. We've got 5 minutes to 5, and we want to flip this so that the listener becomes the storyteller and the storyteller becomes the listener. So I'm going to give you another 4 minutes to do this, and you're going to flip roles. And because everybody needs to practice being this listener, being the person who allows someone else just simply to tell their story. And if we only just ask a question for clarification, that's about as far as we can go with what we speak about. Otherwise, it's their turn to talk. And I'm going to put the timer on, and you may begin.
Because you've already had your practice of listening, and I so wish we were in the same room together, because I would so enjoy hearing what comfort listening felt like for you. So let's just talk a little bit about, I'll be the one talking, obviously, but this whole ability just to hear someone else's story. just to let them have the floor, just to let it be their story without having to jump in with our story. Oh yeah, it was just like that for me too. No, it's not. And a grieving person doesn't need to hear our story. We just need to be there to listen to theirs. So this way of listening is such an important process of just learning that this is not about me, it's about them. And when we do that without having to think about it all the time, about what we're going to say next, it really allows for that grieving person to have that space to tell their own story. So while you're at home, would you think of somebody that you would feel safe to tell your story with? Sometimes we even need to give the person we're talking to the instructions. I need to talk to you right now, and I need you just to listen. Please don't interrupt, and don't give me any kind of judgment or conflict or comparison. Could you just listen to me? See if you can find somebody that can do that for you today sometime over the weekend, and just ask them simply to listen. See how that helps you be able to share your story, to express your loss and your grief. And it's part of, I think, what Scripture says, to bear one another's burdens. It doesn't say to fix each other's problems. It just says bear one another's burdens. And maybe in the simple way that we're just designed by creation, that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, if we use them in that proportion, we might be much more helpful for one another than using it in the way that we normally do, by talking way too much and listening far too little. So I hope this exercise has been helpful for you to think about how to truly comfort the grieving with a listening heart. I'll meet you on the platform in just a minute.
Okay, and like I told you yesterday, I think you are by all means an exceptional group. And so for some of you that had a chance to share and tell me that listening wasn't as hard as you thought, now I'd like to hear from another listener. Is there someone that hasn't spoken yet that was a listener that would like to share their experience? What was listening like for you?
You like space? Okay.
What was listening like for you?
Okay. Whatever. Here.
Okay, here's a hand right over here, Steve.
Well, sure.
Okay, what was comfort listening like for you?
I was on both ends. Listening is like becoming part of the story. You cry.
Yes.
And touch. And you look with your eyes, but it's here. It's in the heart.
It's in your heart, isn't it?
And that was, it was amazing. So, thank you.
Yeah, you had a good listener? Yes, wonderful. Good listeners. Beautiful. Someone else that was a listener. Right here.
I was a listener this time for this good man to my right. Listening with your heart is very difficult.
It is.
Because you tend to get involved. And I cried with him.
And you wept with him.
I wept with him.
And that is biblical. Weep with those who weep.
Jesus wept.
Jesus wept. Absolutely. Absolutely. One's back there standing up.
Yes, I've listened to patients for years, and I'm always marveling at how every time it's different, and every time it touches my heart.
You let your heart be touched. You listen with your heart. Is there a storyteller that would like to say what it felt like to tell your story and be listened to this way? Did it affect you to tell your story and be listened to in this way? Storyteller, would you like to share? Just a minute. We'll see if someone else can. Yeah, go ahead. Any storyteller that would like to say, wow, this was amazing to be listened to this way? We have shy storytellers today. There we go.
I didn't realize that I didn't have someone to listen to me, or that I needed that, actually. But I lost my adopted dad a year ago, and then his wife just died in May. And they did a together memorial for them. And so my husband and I went, and my husband was asked to do the memorial. But he kind of adopted me as in academy when I was 14 years old. He was the conference youth director, education director, Pathfinder director. He had 3 children of his own who were in school. And I was a struggling academy student who had a mom who really could afford to help me through academy. And he just kind of took me under his wing and made sure that I made it through academy.
And as you told this story, how did that feel for you?
Well, it was just a blessing, because I could see that she was empathetic and just listened with her heart, and that really touched my heart. So I'm just thankful.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? Yeah. I'm going to ask a question, because we all belong to different congregations around this conference, and maybe some out of this conference even. What would happen if we listened to one another in church? If we really heard and knew each other's stories? Would the conflicts kind of go away? We'd come together, wouldn't we? Wouldn't we? You know, when we do this exercise in churches as we visit them, it's a shock. Some people have attended church together for 20, 30 years and never knew each other's stories. And they're now, in just a matter of 4 minutes, have been drawn together. You see, it's not the hardest thing to do, is it? We've thought it is. We've let our culture inform us that, just listening and being still, oh, that's way too hard. But we've just learned today that it's not the hardest thing to do. In fact, it's one of the best things to do. And when it is time, the story has been told, we can then say, I have an idea. I wonder if this could help you feel better. And that's the time to share the idea. And they might say, no, thank you. They might not be interested right then, but they'll just need you to keep listening, keep praying. Is that not what our Father in heaven does? He keeps listening. He keeps listening. Does he cast judgment? No. Does he listen with his eyes and his heart? Absolutely he does. So comfort listening is just an extension of the beauty of God's character, isn't it? We can go home with that, can't we? We surely can. There might be something else you want to go home with, though, too. If you're thinking of people you know back home that have been suffering in their own pain and loss and grief, do you think a Comfort for the Day book could help them? Could it support them? Could it guide them through their grief and their loss? So I'm just planting that in your mind. There's a few more left in the ABC if you want to go pick one up, or 2 or 3 to take home to share with somebody. That would be a beautiful way to be a skillful comforter, is to give somebody a resource that would truly guide them in their grief. We've come to the end of our days together. Our workshop now has come to its conclusion. I hope these activities have brought you something really useful that you can return home with. And stay in touch with us via our website and our Facebook page. Let us know how things are going. When we leave camp meeting, we'll put a little post about being here. And any comments that you have, we'd love to have you get on Facebook and tell others what it was like for you to be here and what you learned while you were here. So thank you for letting us come and be a part of your camp meeting. And would you mind if I close in prayer and then you make the announcements? Okay, let us bow our heads and thank God. Almighty Father in heaven, you are the God of all wisdom and all comfort. We ask that you will help us leave this place with these new ideas, new skills, new understanding, new softened hearts, to be able to be your comfort to those around us, to comfort them with the comfort you have given us. Thank you for this opportunity. In the powerful, beautiful, precious name of Jesus, amen.